Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We know you're all very busy, so I'll wait about 30 seconds or so for a few others to join us, and then we will jump right in. All right, looks like we've had a few others join us, so let's get started. Thank you again for your time and attention today. My name is Henry Burke. I am a lead advisor here at Curi Capital. I'm in downtown Chicago. Curi Capital has 10 offices nationwide, and our team expands across almost all of them. I am not personally a Chicago native. I was actually born in the Minneapolis, Minnesota area, but I've been here for 5 or so years now. I love working with our clients and solving or evading problems through detailed financial planning. I'm sure my partner John resonates with that message. And he is co hosting this webinar today with me. He and I are both certified financial planners and have many years of combined advising and wealth management experience. So I'll pass it over to John and allow him to briefly introduce himself.
Thanks, Henry, and welcome to everyone joining the webinar today. Like Henry said, my name is John. I've been with Curi Capital for about 3 years at this point as an advisor and in the Washington, D.C. office, covering some of our East Coast clients. So we'll go ahead and hop into things today. Really just wanted to talk about different things to do before you sign with a practice and get your first paycheck. So let's hop right in. Before your first paycheck ever hits your bank account, there's usually a step that many new attendings either rush through or skip entirely, and that's going to be negotiating the contract. A lot of physicians assume that their contract is take it or leave it, but it's usually not. So most physician contracts have more flexibility than they appear, and plus the worst anyone can say is no. So what exactly should you be looking at when you're looking at these contracts? Couple common negotiation points include signing bonuses, relocation assistance, CME allowances or continuing medical education, and then schedule flexibility. They're not just luxuries that are added on to the job, but honestly, they're just standard asks that practices expect you to ask about or have questions about. And two things that I want you to pay close attention to before you sign. Number one is non-compete clauses. And then number two is malpractice tail coverage. Let me explain both of these briefly. The non-compete is going to significantly limit your options if things don't work out at the practice. And tail coverage can be an enormous out-of-pocket expense if it's not covered by your employer. So two just specific tangible takeaways to talk about at the new practice. Also, clarify what happens after your guarantee period ends. Many contracts come with an income guarantee for year one, maybe year two, and then things shift to a more productivity-based pay. So you really want to understand what that looks like before you're living on that change of income or change of your income structure. Overall, there's just a mindset shift that I would encourage you to have is that this type of negotiation with your practice isn't confrontation, but rather I would think of it as clarification. You're making sure that you understand what you're agreeing to and making sure the arrangement works for both sides. After all, you want to be with the practice for a long time, and the practice wants to keep you around for a long time as well. Next, we'll talk a little bit again before you get that first paycheck, but really around talk about the structure around the paycheck before you get there. So we'll talk about this window between signing your contract and receiving that first paycheck, because this window is actually one of the most important financial moments of your career. The temptation is going to be to start spending. You've finished training, you've earned it, but what I encourage you to do instead is build your system first, before that lifestyle expansion begins and before the spending really increases. A practical version of this is to simply start by separating your fixed expenses. So things like rent, loans, insurance, separate that from your discretionary lifestyle spending. Then estimate your actual after-tax monthly cash flow because gross salary sounds great. It's a big number, but depending on your state, your benefit selections, take-home pay can be significantly lower than you might expect. So it's good to estimate what that might be in your situation. From there, Henry and I would say that you should define three financial priorities over the first 12 months. There's going to be a lot of different priorities for you, and everyone's going to have different priorities, but just choose three, stick to them, and make them your main goals. For some, it's going to be building a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. Great. For others, it's starting retirement contributions or saving for a down payment. And then there might be some of you who relocated and still have transition costs that the practice didn't pick up. Just pick three, write them down, and have those be your main three goals. The next thing that Henry and I would suggest is to automate everything you can. So that's things like savings, investing, debt repayment, and the like. And why automation matters so much is that it's going to remove the monthly decision making that you have to do over and over again. When you have to actively choose to save every month, life is going to get in the way and you won't be able to save or you won't be able to do the things that you originally set out to do. When it's automatic, it's just going to happen. You're protecting yourself from your own impulses in the future by setting up this system in place. Now, this one may not necessarily surprise you, but it's still important to remember that your compensation package is not just your base salary. And we've talked a little bit about this, but only focusing on the headline number can lead to some really costly mistakes in the future. So it's important that you look at the full picture and have a comparison of apples to apples. Things like productivity bonuses and other incentives can meaningfully change your total compensation over time, and sometimes really in your favor, but sometimes maybe not. Signing bonuses, loan repayment assistance, relocation stipends, these all have a dollar amount that belongs in the comparison when you're evaluating these different offers. Think about retirement benefits, employer match percentages, whether the practice offers a 403(b) retirement account or 401(k) retirement account. Perhaps they have different pension structures in place or partnership tracks as you continue to stay long-term at the practice. These different items matter a lot, especially when they're compounded over your 20 or 30-year career. And the point that I really want to emphasize is that the high guaranteed salary may not always be the best long-term opportunity for you. A slightly lower base at a practice with a strong productivity model, clear partnership track, and excellent culture may put you in a much better position 5 or 10 years from now. My last point here, don't forget the intangibles either. Things like autonomy, wellness support, leadership stability, and work culture. These are all really going to affect your quality of life and your ability to stay in that position and with that practice long term. And that has its own financial value that doesn't necessarily have a dollar amount today. To sum up what we've talked about so far is to really harp on the first 2 to 5 years. And this last slide that I'll mention before handing it over to Henry might be the most important concept of what we've discussed so far. And it's one that's going to be hard to internalize in the moment because this moment is going to feel so good, is because when you become an attending, your income might increase 2 or 5 times nearly overnight. And after years of residency, fellowship salaries, that number feels enormous, and it is. But your brain is very, very good at finding ways to spend that money almost immediately and before you even have it in your bank. And what Henry and I have seen time and time again is that the financial decisions that you make in these first 2 to 5 years really set the trajectory for the rest of your career. So you're setting yourself up for success by putting into place these structures today. This is where wealth is built, or it's where wealth can quietly get eroded before you even realize it a decade down the road. One of the levers that matter most in these early years is not your investment rate of return necessarily, but rather your savings rate. So how much you're keeping or how much you're saving on a monthly or yearly basis is more impactful, especially early on. So our recommendation is just to focus on that piece first. And you've likely heard the phrase live like a resident. It's a bit of a cliche, but the underlying idea is sound. You don't need to deprive yourself or never buy anything. But before you lock in a mortgage at the top of your budget, a car payment, maybe private school tuition, or a certain lifestyle standard, just pause for a moment, give yourself some room, because once those fixed expenses are in place, they're really, really hard to undo in the future. And we believe that cash flow, or what is coming in and what is going out of your bank account, is really the engine driving any financial plan. So getting that right first, and almost everything else is going to become easier. Overall, the attending salary can certainly buy you freedom, flexibility, options, and security, or it can buy you obligations that follow you for decades. So the first few years are when that choice gets made.
All great points, John. Appreciate that. Let's talk benefits here. Benefits can make a huge impact. So, first things first, there are very few things as what we'd call free money these days. An employer match is basically as close as you can to getting just that. So, don't leave money on the table. Aim to at least max out that matching component, if not maximize the entire deferral election. This could be one of the very few accounts where your employer actually assists you in building the balance. So put plainly, just accept their help. One last detail with matches, it's also important to know the type of plan you have so you can understand perhaps a vesting schedule of the matching funds. So whether it's cliff vesting or graded vesting, it can make a big difference in the amount you may retain in the account should you ever decide to move to a different employer, for example. Roth versus traditional, this can result in avoiding massive tax liabilities. So each person's situation is different. With physician level income, avoiding tax bombs obviously becomes more and more critical. So as your income continues to climb, mindfulness of tax sensitive strategies only becomes more relevant. So if you struggle on the differences here, feel free to ask questions about it. If you're deciding which accounts to begin or kickstart your investing journey, John and I would say first focus on those tax advantaged accounts. Each of these can serve a different purpose, whether it be retirement, healthcare expenses, or higher education, for a few examples. Perhaps the fastest and most cost efficient form of estate planning can actually be completed in a matter of minutes. What I'm referring to here is electing beneficiaries on your financial or your investment accounts. Beneficiaries are typically loved ones that are close to us that we choose to receive the assets in a specific account should something horrible happen to us. We would say it's always a good process to elect both a primary and a contingent beneficiary, the contingent just being a backup selection there. HSAs and FSAs, are very common questions that we get when clients are taking new roles or are in a open enrollment in period. So HSAs are one of those rare triple tax advantaged accounts, meaning you actually receive a tax benefit today when you contribute, over time as your funds grow, and lastly, when you withdraw those funds for qualified healthcare expenses. So in order to use the HSA, keep in mind you do have to be enrolled in a high deductible health plan. So this is not for everyone, but typically this is more relevant for those that are in great health because, as the name suggests, you'll have to pay a higher deductible first before any insurance kicks in to help you with the claim. If you use the HSA over the course of your career, it truly can almost sneakily become, a large and highly beneficial account for you. I'd say lastly, it's actually one of the easier accounts to quote unquote max out. The 2026 limit for individual coverage is $4,400. And sometimes, just like your 401k or your 403b, your employer can help with these contributions as well. But insurance is hugely important, especially for this crowd. So your income stream is the gas that your financial plan needs. Protecting that stream is absolutely necessary. So insurance is about risk mitigation, something we encourage all physicians to explore is the concept of disability insurance. So any type of potential employer coverage, it frequently does leave coverage gaps, and that in turn leaves the employees heavily exposed to, large risks should something go awry. So protecting this gap with potentially your own policy can alleviate this stress. John, I would say it's highly advisable to seek what we would call an own occupation policy. So I'll give an example here. Essentially, this type of policy will pay if you're unable to perform the specific duties of your job. So if I were a surgeon and I developed a tremor in my hand, I'm actually no longer able to safely perform the functions of my job. If I had an any occupation policy, for example, the coverage would not apply there because they would deem that I'm still eligible or fit to maybe consult in my area of expertise or teach on my specific field. So the own occupation policy steps in there to protect with that massive risk. In essence, I would say think about the adaptations that either you or your family would need to make, without your above average income. That's what we're trying to avoid there. Student loans versus investing, the age old question, as we say. Unfortunately, everyone is a little bit different here. So, looking at the points on the slide, I do think everything is necessary. I would say first, equip yourself with all of the information, like PSLF or federal loans, and of course the corresponding details of the loans, like their interest rates. I'd say next, you really do have to be honest with yourself about how you view debt, because everybody's view can be a little bit different. And that viewpoint can actually help guide you whether you should be investing right now, paying down your debt, or even following a combination of the two. So a lot of folks, they smartly choose to pay down higher interest debt first while simultaneously investing. That's a pretty common practice, we'd say. Whichever route you do choose, the big thing is don't operate blindly. Stick to your plan. That's where we certainly see the most success. A wealth building in your 30s. So beginning your contributions as early as possible is paramount. As advisors, we like to say we value time in the market more so than timing the market. So if we look below, uh, we do have some assumptions here. So assuming max contributions, a steady 8% return, an appropriate allocation, we see that this 401k rose to just about $3.5 million. Now that's obviously extremely powerful. But keep in mind, this is just one account. So there are more than a handful of other accounts that can grow alongside this 401k as you continue to build your wealth. The key is, even if you can't, in this example, maybe reach that max contribution, that limit, the key is simply to start. Your future self will absolutely thank your current self that you did so. We've thrown a decent amount of information at you today. So if I had to summarize everything from today, I'd say take home the following 3 points. First, write down that written budget or cash flow statement or your debt pay down strategy. Truly write it down. I assure you that it will help you. Understanding the various benefits elections, choosing those proper ones that are tailored for your specific situation, and automating those investment contributions where you can. And lastly, building that liquidity base for, I'd say before your lifestyle even attempts to jump, in accordance with your newly heightened take home pay. So those are the big three. If any of you listening today are having issues even landing on what are the three, my specific situation from these three, book some time with John and I. We are here to help you. But we also wanted to leave some time for questions. So please feel free to ask those now. But thank you again for your time today and for your attention. Looks like we already have three that have come in during the webinar. So first we have, what are the biggest financial mistakes that physicians make in the first 1 to 3 years as attendings, and how can they avoid them? So with the biggest financial mistakes, I'd say we touched on the most common ones. First, that lifestyle creep. If your income jumps to, let's say, a few $100,000, but every dollar is essentially already spoken for, you're going to run into some trouble. So remember what John said, live like a resident when you're first building that financial base. If I had to add one, I would say, aside from the no written debt plan or delaying the start of your investment journey, I would say buying investments that you're actually not too familiar with or that you do not understand. So the beginning of your investing journey does not need to be flashy or overly complicated in any sort of way. So have a conversation, sit down with a trusted professional, ideally an individual or a team that understands your career trajectory, has worked with those that have been in your shoes before, and hash out a plan that involves investments or products that you can understand. Now, I'm not saying by any means you need to be an expert on them, but hopefully, that advisor or that consultant can bring you to a level of understanding that you can feel comfortable with it when your head hits the pillow at night. So, for example, complex investment products, like annuities or maybe speculative real estate, those do not need to be part of your plan, at the onset of your journey. Second question, how should physicians decide between competing financial priorities early in their career? Yeah, I can take this one too. This is a great question. I would first note that just because you have the option to pay attention to one specific goal or one specific topic, that doesn't really mean you're in an all or nothing situation. So what do I actually mean by that? So if you have a 401k or a 403b, that does not mean you actually have to hit that maximum deferral election, for example. Of course, it may be a good idea if it flows, through well in with every other aspect of your financial plan. Great, then it may be applicable to you. But you can still contribute a meaningful amount to that account. As we already said, hopefully enough to at least receive that employer match. But maybe you're still contributing a meaningful amount, but not hitting that max contribution or that max deferral. But in turn, by doing this, it might free up uh, other cash flow or the availability for you to spend down on some loans or build liquidity for home purchase. So the way in which I think is the easiest way to navigate this is actually writing down, but prioritizing the goals. So if you wrote down all of your goals, would you describe each goal as essential? Would you describe them as important? Or would you maybe describe them as purely aspirational? So that categorization can actually help you dictate how much you're allocating across maybe a subset of competing goals. Now, that's obviously easier said than done, but again, if you need help thinking about this, you're in the right place. So grab my contact or John's contact, and you can set up some time with us. Third question here, how does a physician define enough income before shaping identity and lifestyle?
I can answer this one. Thanks, Henry.
Yeah.
This is a really great question, and I would say this is a very individualized and personalized question as well. So that starting point likely looks different for different people, and that ending point likely looks different for different people as well. And I think one of the best things that you can do, and we mentioned this, is just separate out those necessary or fixed expenses and then the expenses that you have more discretion over, whether that be eating out or traveling. Two of those are, very common. And what is it going to take to run your family household? What does it take on a monthly basis or a yearly basis? And doing some projections, sitting down either with a financial advisor, or a consultant and figuring out what does it look like for me and my family now, but what does it look like 10, 30, 50 years from now? What level of savings might be needed to uh, run our family unit? Questions like this, Henry and I help clients answer and really figure out on a daily basis. And I think, a great indicator is, and you've likely heard it before, is lifestyle creep. So if your discretionary expenses continue to go up at essentially the same clip as your income year after year, that savings amount is also likely not increasing because you've chosen to increase the lifestyle. And so there's a lifestyle creep and a problem there that over the long run, you might find that you found yourself in a little bit of trouble with fixed expenses that are too high for your situation. And so I think it begins with asking yourself some questions too. What does it take to run my household? What is it that I want to do now, 5 years from now, and in the future? What is it that I'm looking to do? And really sitting down, with an advisor and figuring out what is that dollar amount that's needed at the end of the day. Certainly, it's about money and dollar signs too, but a lot of it is on the behavioral side and the emotional side of things. What is it that you want to get out of this life? What are some goals that you have for you and your family? And as Henry and I mentioned, that's very individualized and very personal too. So we're happy to chat with anyone who might have questions on their specific situation. But that's hopefully a good base to begin and start from.
Yeah, well said. I know we're coming up on time here, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time today. But John, why don't if we have a slide with our contact information or QR codes, I'll give everyone a few seconds here. If they want to scan those, again, like I said, John and I are more than willing to sit down with any of you and talk about your specific situation. So please, scan the QR codes and save our contact information. We're more than happy to help in any way that we can. Fantastic. Alrighty. Well, thank you everyone again for your time today, for your attention. We appreciate you being here. And if there's anything that John or myself can do, please do not hesitate to reach out and have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Take care.